Welcome everybody to Italy for the world famous Monza Grand Prix. We're hoping for an absolute spectacle today of fast-paced driving on those extra long straights with not many slow corners, meaning there should hopefully be a lot of overtaking round here unless the rumours of mid-race rain curtail those speeds. But the grid for today's two-lap Grand Prix sees Red Bull on pole, Mercedes in second, Ferrari, the home favourite, in third, Renault in fourth, McLaren in fifth, and Lotus in last place. The Red Bull driver would love to maintain their lead in the championship, whilst the Ferrari is hoping for less mistakes. Anyway, let's go to the 5 red lights and start the Monza Grand Prix. And it's a great start for most of the teams as the Red Bull, in fighting the Merc, closes off the first corner and forces them both slow, meaning the other cars can brake much later and attempt overtakes. And that's exactly what they do as they box in the Mercedes and push him into last place with nowhere to go. But during the fighting, the Red Bull just about maintains his lead of the race with the Ferrari right up his tailpipe. But we're on to the long kink around the right bend, and the Mercedes is all but guaranteeing third now, as they got a great launch around the back markers, but they need the Red Bull and Ferrari to slow each other down in their fight for first. And that is exactly what happens right at the beginning of this race, as the Ferrari goes too fast into the chicane and spins it into the tyre wall, damaging his gearbox and meaning they won't be able to hit 6th gear for the rest of the race. But in the midfield, the Renault also spins out due to the fierce fighting through the turn and also damages their gearbox, meaning their top speed is now only 4th gear, but they are going to try and soldier on and see how it goes. As the Mercedes senses his chance to try and catch up with the Red Bull going into the back straight, this could very well be an interesting race now with that damaged Ferrari. But the Renault is at this moment considering retiring from the race. And yep, the Renault pulls up at the side of the track because he just can't catch up with only 4 gears. So he wants to try and preserve the car for the next race, as the Ferrari now has to attempt to shake those back markers as the Red Bull pulls ever further away. But that Mercedes is not going to make it easy for the Red Bull, and he powers down the straight as fast as he can, hoping to get the jump into the next chicane as the Ferrari fights the McLaren. The Red Bull though showed his superior racing skills by forcing the gear selection on the Mercedes, who will now be fighting with the back markers into the next straight. And it is an absolute calamity for the Merc. In fighting with the Red Bull, he gets blocked off by the Ferrari and McLaren and suddenly can't go anywhere. What a disaster his race is turning into. And it does get worse as he's forced to go slower than the rest of the pack in the hopes he can switch back his way out of traffic as the Red Bull nearly crosses the line for the end of the first lap. But the rain is finally here. It lashes down quickly, forcing the Lotus off the track and into retirement as he wants no part of this torrential downpour. But this is now a great opportunity for the Mercedes to try and claw back second at least, as he has much better traction in the rain. But it does slow him down going into that first straight, as the warning symbols outside of the racing line means he does have to pull out of an overtake on the Ferrari, as no one can see the Red Bull it is just coasting away in first position. And the Red Bull easily maintains its lead. It's just going ever further and further away, whilst the Mercedes decides to be a little bit more risky and is realistically the only competition now for that McLaren, as the Ferrari with its damaged gearbox means it's just going to always lag behind now. But this next set of corners is very important for that second place position. The Ferrari pulls up as he can't compete with this grid in the wet. He's only got 4 gears, so he pulls over to try and salvage the car for the next race, as the Mercedes blocks off the racing line into the corner, hoping to get a great switchback manoeuvre. And it pays off big time as the McLaren goes slow through the tight left-hander, but the Mercedes gets a great launch on that switchback and ends up coming down the straight, seeing a very, very slow Red Bull who keeps locking up their wheels under braking in the wet conditions. The Red Bull just cannot gain traction on this wet track and struggles going through the corner, going slower than usual. The driver is struggling as the Mercedes driver senses the opportunity to try and catch him up, as the McLaren spins out at the corner just before it hits the straight and damages his gearbox. There has been a hell of a lot of that today. Big gearbox problems, but it does mean he is going to retire from the race. What is it with Monza today, eh? It's turned into Prime Monaco with the 4 DNFs. So we go to the only 2 cars left out there on this last lap. The Red Bull is dictating the pace, but the Mercedes is determined to win his first ever race. And by using all the focus he's acquired to pull off an amazing set of cornering, he gets himself right on the back end of the Red Bull, who keeps locking up. This ending is going to be epic in the wet, as the Mercedes overtakes the Red Bull on the inside under braking, and he's now in full control of this entire race. And the Merc maintains his foothold going into the straight, and just before the 2 downshift braking he will have to focus again for, the Mercedes starts to believe he can finally win as they traverse the final bend. And the Mercedes, who started off so badly in the dry weather, got overtaken harshly many times by the back markers, begins to believe as he sees the Red Bull struggling in these wet conditions. And he does come home, sealing victory for Mercedes, his first ever one. He is super pleased as he has just got the better traction and dice rolls in the end in the wet, along with a boatload of focus that he gained during the dry parts of the track to help him along the way. The Red Bull driver is of course kicking himself as he kept struggling on those back corners. He found himself constantly locking up in 2nd or 4th gear, but he will be ready for the next race whenever that happens. And with that, I want to thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe.